The gavel slammed, and the courtroom air turned to stone. Eli Harper's heart stopped as the judge's voice cut through. Guilty. In that single word, his world, his love, his fight, his truth, teetered on the edge of collapse. Eli stood in the defendant's box, his hands trembling at his sides, the weight of the word criminal sinking into his bones. He was 30, a graphic designer from Portland, Oregon, with a life built on quiet dreams and loud convictions. His dark brown eyes scanned the room, landing on Marcus, his partner, seated in the front row. Marcus's blonde curls were disheveled. His green eyes locked on Eli with a fierce, unspoken promise. We're in this together. The courtroom in this small, conservative town of Redding, California, felt like a trap, its oak-paneled walls closing in. Eli had known the odds were stacked against him, but he hadn't expected the betrayal to sting this deep. It all started 6 months ago at a pride rally in Redding. Eli and Marcus, together for 3 years, had driven from Portland to support a local LGBTQ group fighting a proposed city ordinance banning public displays of non-traditional affection. The rally was peaceful, rainbow flags waving, voices singing, until a group of counter-protesters arrived. Words turned to shoves, then fists. Eli, trying to shield a teenage girl from a thrown bottle, ended up in a scuffle. The police arrived, and somehow he was the one in handcuffs, charged with assault and inciting a riot. The truth? He'd thrown no punches. But the town's narrative painted him as the aggressor, the outsider stirring trouble. The trial was a farce. The prosecution twisted Eli's activism into agitation, his love for Marcus into provocation. Witnesses lied, claiming Eli had started the fight. The judge, a stern man with a reputation for upholding traditional values, barely hid his bias. Marcus sat through every session, his graphic design freelance work piling up, his heart breaking with each damning word. Eli's lawyer, a young public defender named Saren Gwynn, fought hard but was outmatched by a system that wanted Eli silenced. Now, as the judge read the sentence, 6 months in county jail, Eli felt the air leave his lungs. Marcus stood, his chair scraping the floor, his face pale but resolute. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, some triumphant, others outraged. Eli caught the eye of a guard, Officer Daniels, a grizzled man in his 50s who'd watched the trial unfold. Daniels's face was unreadable, but his eyes held something Eli couldn't place. Pity, maybe, or respect. As bailiffs moved to escort Eli out, Sarah leaned close. "We're appealing this," she whispered. "Stay strong." Eli nodded, but his gaze was on Marcus, who mouthed, "I love you." The words were a lifeline, pulling Eli from the edge of despair. He straightened, refusing to let the courtroom see him break. In the holding cell, Eli's mind raced. How had it come to this? He'd grown up in Seattle, raised by a single mom who taught him to stand up for what was right. At 22, he came out as gay, expecting rejection but finding love instead. First from his mom, then from friends, and eventually from Marcus, a photographer with a laugh that could light up the darkest rooms. They'd built a life together, sharing a small apartment filled with art, plants, and dreams of a future where they could marry without fear. But Redding wasn't Portland. Here, their love was a crime in the eyes of many. The cell door clanged open, and Officer Daniels appeared. "Harper, you've got a visitor," he said gruffly. Eli followed, expecting Marcus, but instead found a teenage girl, Lila, the one he'd protected at the rally. She was 16, with bright blue hair and a nervous smile. "I told the truth," she said, her voice shaking. "I told them you saved me. They wouldn't listen." Eli's throat tightened. "You tried, Lila. That's enough." She shook her head. "It's not." I'm starting a petition. People are talking online, #free Eli. You're not alone. The words hit harder than the gavel. Eli had felt alone, branded a criminal for who he was and what he stood for. But Lila's defiance, her blue hair blazing like a flag, reminded him why he'd fought in the first place. As Daniels led him back to the cell, the guard's silence felt different. Not cold, but heavy, like he was carrying something unsaid. That night, Eli lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling. The jail was cold, the sounds of clanging doors and distant shouts filling the air. He thought of Marcus, alone in their hotel room, probably drafting social media posts to rally support. He thought of Lila, a kid brave enough to stand up to a town that wanted to erase her. And he thought of himself, not as a criminal, but as a man who loved fiercely and fought fearlessly. The next morning, Sarah arrived with news. The appeal's filed, but there's more, she said, her eyes bright. Your case is gaining traction online. People are calling it a miscarriage of justice. There's a protest planned outside the courthouse tomorrow. Eli's heart lifted, but doubt crept in. Will it change anything? Sarah leaned forward. It already has. You're not just a defendant anymore, Eli. You're a symbol. The protest outside the Reading courthouse was a sea of color. Rainbow flags, handmade signs, and voices chanting, "Free Eli." Eli couldn't see it from his cell, but he could hear it, the sound vibrating through the concrete walls like a heartbeat. It was day 2 of his sentence, and the world outside was refusing to let him fade. Marcus stood at the front of the crowd, holding a sign that read, "Love is not a crime." His blonde curls caught the California sun, and his voice, amplified by a megaphone, carried a fire Eli hadn't heard before. Eli Harper is not a criminal, Marcus shouted. He's a hero who stood up for us all. The crowd roared, a mix of locals, out-of-town activists, and even a few curious onlookers. Lila was there too, her blue hair unmistakable, live streaming the event on her phone. #FreeEli was trending, with thousands of posts flooding X from across the country. Inside, Eli sat in a meeting with Sarah, who was practically vibrating with energy. "The media's picking this up," she said, sliding her tablet across the table. Articles from Portland, San Francisco, even New York were calling the trial a sham. A viral video of Lila recounting the rally incident had over 1 million views. "This pressure could force the judge to reconsider," Sarah said. "But we need to keep the momentum going." Eli nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking of Marcus out there fighting for him. Their relationship hadn't always been easy. Marcus's parents had cut him off when he came out, and Eli's relentless activism sometimes left little room for quiet moments. But they'd always found their way back to each other, their love a stubborn flame that refused to die. Now, that love was fueling a movement. As Sarah left, Officer Daniels appeared at the cell door. "Harper, you're making a lot of noise out there," he said, his tone gruff but not unkind. Eli braced for a reprimand, but instead, Daniels handed him a folded newspaper. "Thought you should see this." The front page showed the protest with Marcus's face front and center. Eli's chest tightened. "Thanks," he managed, his voice thick. Daniels lingered. "My kid's gay," he said suddenly, his voice low. "He's 19. Doesn't talk to me much anymore. Seeing you makes me think I should try harder." Before Eli could respond, Daniels walked away, leaving Eli stunned. The guard's words were a crack in the wall, a reminder that even in Reading, hearts could shift. That night, Marcus was allowed a brief visit. The visitation room was sterile, the glass between them a cold barrier, but Marcus's smile warmed the space. "You should see it out there, Eli," he said, pressing his hand to the glass. People are coming from Sacramento, even LA. You're not just fighting for us anymore. You're fighting for everyone. Eli pressed his hand to the glass, aligning it with Marcus's. I'm scared, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. What if this doesn't work? What if I'm stuck here? Marcus's eyes softened. Then I'll wait, and I'll fight. We all will. The next day, the protest grew louder. Eli could hear chants of justice for Eli as he was led to a meeting with Sarah and a new ally, a lawyer from San Francisco named Javier Torres, who specialized in civil rights cases. Javier was in his 40s, sharp-eyed and confident, with a reputation for taking on tough cases. Your trial was a travesty, he said, spreading documents across the table. We've got new witnesses, people from the rally who recorded the incident. The footage shows you didn't start the fight. Hope flickered in Eli's chest, but he tempered it. Why didn't they come forward before? Fear, Javier said. This town's got a tight grip, but the protest is giving people courage. We're filing for a retrial based on this evidence. As the meeting ended, Eli caught Daniels watching from the doorway. The guard's face was still stern, but his eyes held that same weight Eli had noticed before. Keep your head up, Harper, Daniels said, almost too quiet to hear. It was the first time Eli felt seen, not as a criminal but as a man. Back in his cell, Eli thought about the ripple effect of his case. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for Lila, who deserved to grow up without fear. For Marcus, who deserved to love openly. For Danielle's son, who deserved a father who understood. The weight of it was heavy, but it gave Eli purpose. He wasn't just a defendant, he was a spark. By the end of the week, the protest had swelled to hundreds. Sarah brought news that the judge was under pressure to review the case. The governor's office is getting calls, she said. This isn't just local anymore. Eli allowed himself a small smile, imagining Marcus out there, his voice carrying their love to the world. The courthouse steps were a battlefield of ideals. By day 10, the protest had grown into a movement, with national news vans parked outside and hashtags like Justice for Eli and Love Wins trending worldwide. Eli, still behind bars, felt the energy through the walls, a pulse of hope that kept him grounded. Marcus was relentless. He'd organized a coalition of activists, from local LGBTQ groups to national organizations like the ACLU. He spent his days coordinating with Sarah and Javier, his nights writing posts on X that reached millions. One post, a photo of him and Eli laughing at a Portland cafe, captioned, "This is the man they call a criminal," had gone viral, shared by celebrities and politicians alike. Marcus wasn't just fighting for Eli. He was fighting for every queer person who'd ever felt silenced. Inside, Eli was grappling with his own battles. The jail was a pressure cooker. Some inmates taunted him, others ignored him, but a few, like a quiet 20-year-old named Trey, offered unexpected support. Trey, in for a minor theft charge, had seen the protest on the jail's shared TV. "You're famous, man," he said one night, sliding a candy bar under Eli's cell door. "Keep fighting. My brother's like you. He'd be proud." Eli clung to these moments. They reminded him that his fight wasn't just personal, it was universal. He spent his days writing letters to Marcus, pouring out his fears and hopes. "I'm not a hero," he wrote in one. "I'm just a guy who loves you. But if this fight helps one kid like Lila, it's worth it." Sarah and Javier's work was paying off. The new footage from the rally showed Eli pulling Lila out of harm's way as a counter-protester swung at her. It was undeniable proof, and the public outcry was forcing the court to act. The judge, under scrutiny, agreed to a hearing for a retrial. "This is huge," Javier said during a visit. "But we need to keep the pressure on. The town's divided. Some want you free, others want you locked up for good. Eli nodded, his jaw tight. He'd seen the hate mail sent to Sarah's office, calling him slurs, threatening Marcus. But he'd also seen the support, letters from strangers, drawings from kids, even a poem from a trans teen in Ohio who said Eli's story gave them hope. It was a strange duality, being both vilified and celebrated. One afternoon, Officer Daniels escorted Eli to the visitation room. Marcus was there, looking exhausted but determined. "We're planning a vigil tonight," he said. "Candles, songs, the works. Lila's singing a song she wrote for you." Eli's heart swelled. Lila, the kid he'd protected, was now a voice for him. As they spoke, Daniels stood by the door, his posture stiff but his eyes softer than usual. When the visit ended, he walked Eli back to his cell. "That vigil's gonna be something," Daniels said, his voice low. "My wife's going. Says she wants to support your partner." The word came out haltingly, like Daniels was testing it. Eli nodded, grateful for the gesture. The vigil that night was broadcast on the jail TV. Eli watched, tears in his eyes, as hundreds gathered, their candles flickering like stars. Lila's voice, clear and haunting, sang of love and freedom. Marcus stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders, his face a mix of pride and pain. The crowd held signs, one reading, "Love is never a crime," echoing the note Eli imagined in the courtroom hallway. The next day, Sarah brought news. The retrial was scheduled for next week. "The judge is rattled," she said. "The governor's office is watching, and the media won't let this go. We've got a real shot." Eli felt a spark of hope, but it was tempered by fear. A retrial meant facing the courtroom again, the same judge, the same biases. But this time he wasn't alone. The world was watching, and Marcus was out there, turning their love into a movement. As Eli lay in his cell that night, he thought of the first time he met Marcus, at a Portland art gallery. Marcus had been photographing a mural, his camera clicking as he laughed at Eli's nervous attempt to flirt. That moment felt like a lifetime ago, but it was the foundation of everything they were fighting for now. Eli closed his eyes, holding onto that memory, ready for whatever came next. The retrial loomed like a storm on the horizon. Eli spent the days leading up to it in a haze of anticipation and dread. The jail's monotony, gray walls, stale air, endless waiting, was broken only by visits from Sarah and Javier, who brought updates on the case and the growing movement outside. Marcus was a force of nature. He'd turned the protest into a daily event, with speakers, musicians, and activists from across the country. X was ablaze with free Eli posts, including a thread from a prominent senator calling for judicial reform. Marcus had even started a fundraiser to cover legal costs, raising thousands in days. "You're not just a case anymore," Sarah told Eli. "You're a catalyst." But the pressure was taking its toll. During a visit, Marcus's eyes were shadowed, his hands fidgeting. "I'm scared, Eli," he admitted. "What if we lose again? What if they keep you here?" Eli reached for his hand through the glass, wishing he could erase the fear. "Then we keep fighting," he said. "Together." The retrial began on a crisp Monday morning. The courtroom was packed, with reporters, activists, and locals crammed into the benches. Eli, in a borrowed suit, felt exposed under the judge's gaze. But this time, the energy was different. The new evidence, videos, witness statements, even a counterprotester who'd recanted his testimony, painted a clear picture. Eli was innocent. Javier was relentless, cross-examining the prosecution's witnesses until their stories unraveled. Sarah presented the footage, frame by frame, showing Eli shielding Lila, The judge's face remained impassive, but Eli could see cracks in his composure. The room buzzed with tension, every word a battle. Marcus sat in the front row, his green eyes locked on Eli. Beside him, Lila clutched a notebook, her blue hair a beacon of defiance. Even Officer Daniels was there, standing at the back, his uniform crisp but his expression unreadable. Eli drew strength from them, his heart pounding as the trial unfolded. The prosecution fought back, painting Eli as a troublemaker who'd provoked the violence. But their arguments felt hollow against the evidence. When Lila took the stand, her voice steady despite her nerves, she recounted how Eli had saved her. "He's not a criminal," she said, staring at the judge. "He's a hero." The courtroom fell silent. Eli's throat tightened, and he saw Marcus wipe away a tear. Even Daniels shifted, his jaw tight. The judge called a recess, and Eli was led to a holding room. Sarah followed, her eyes bright. "We've got them on the ropes," she said. "The judge knows the world's watching." That night, in his cell, Eli couldn't sleep. He thought of Marcus, of Lila, of the countless strangers who'd rallied for him. He thought of Danielle's son, out there somewhere, maybe watching the news. The weight of their support was humbling, but it also terrified him. What if he let them down? The next day, the defense rested. Javier's closing argument was a masterpiece, weaving Eli's story into a larger narrative of justice and love. "Eli Harper didn't start a fight," he said. "He stood up for what's right. Punishing him punishes us all." The courtroom erupted in applause, quickly silenced by the judge's gavel. As the judge deliberated, Eli was taken back to his cell. Marcus managed a quick visit, his voice hoarse from chanting. "Whatever happens, I'm proud of you," he said. Eli nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Hours later, Daniels appeared at the cell door. "It's time," he said, his voice softer than usual. As they walked to the courtroom, Daniels paused. "My kid saw you on TV," he said. "Said you're the kind of guy he wants to be." Eli stared, stunned, as Daniels led him inside. The judge's verdict came swiftly, not guilty. The courtroom exploded, cheers, sobs, gasps. Eli turned to Marcus, who was already rushing toward him, tears streaming down his face. They embraced, the world fading away. Lila joined them, her arms around them both, her laughter mixing with tears. As Eli left the courtroom, Daniels stood by the door. The guard raised his hand in a salute, his eyes wet with tears. "Respect, Harper," he said, his voice breaking. Eli nodded, too overwhelmed to speak, as the sunlight hit his face, free at last. Freedom tasted like sunlight and Marcus's kiss. Outside the courthouse, Eli stepped into a crowd of supporters, their cheers washing over him like a wave. Rainbow flags fluttered, and signs with "Love Wins" and "Free Eli" bobbed above the sea of faces. Lila was there, her blue hair glowing, hugging Eli so tightly he laughed through his tears. Marcus held his hand, their fingers intertwined, a silent vow that they'd made it through. The media swarmed, cameras flashing, but Eli barely noticed. He was free not just from jail but from the weight of being branded a criminal. The judge's "not guilty" echoed in his mind. A victory not just for him, but for everyone who'd fought alongside him. Sarah and Javier joined them, their faces beaming. "This is just the start," Javier said. "Your case is exposing cracks in the system. We're pushing for broader reforms." Eli nodded, overwhelmed. He'd never set out to be a symbol, but he couldn't deny the impact. Posts on X were already calling the verdict a landmark, a step toward justice for marginalized communities. As the crowd dispersed, Eli and Marcus drove to a quiet park on the outskirts of Reading. They sat on a bench, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows. "I thought I'd lose you," Marcus admitted, his voice soft. Eli squeezed his hand. "You kept me going. You and Lila and everyone." That evening, they attended a celebration hosted by local activists. The community center was packed, with music, food, and stories of the fight. Lila performed her song again, her voice stronger now, and Eli felt a pang of pride. She was the future, fearless and fierce. Trey, the inmate who'd shared his candy bar, was there too, released on parole. "Told you you're a hero," he said, grinning. Officer Daniels arrived, out of uniform, looking awkward but determined. He approached Eli, holding out a hand. "I was wrong about you," he said. "My son, he's coming to visit next week. Because of you, I'm gonna try to make things right." Eli shook his hand, his heart full. Danielle's salute in the courtroom had been a turning point, a sign that even the hardest hearts could soften. The next day, Eli and Marcus returned to Portland. Their apartment felt like a sanctuary, the familiar clutter of art supplies and plants a reminder of the life they'd built. But the fight wasn't over. Sarah called with news. The Reading ordinance banning non-traditional affection was under review, thanks to the attention Eli's case had brought. "You're changing things," she said. "Not just here, but everywhere." Eli started speaking at rallies, sharing his story. He and Marcus worked with Javier to launch a nonprofit, Love Stands, to support queer youth facing discrimination. Lila became their first intern, her energy infectious. The work was exhausting, but it gave Eli purpose. He wasn't just a survivor. He was a builder, creating a world where love wasn't a crime. One night, as they lay in bed, Marcus traced circles on Eli's palm. "We made it," he whispered. Eli smiled, pulling him close. "Yeah, and we're just getting started." A year later, Eli stood on a stage in San Francisco, addressing a crowd of thousands at a Pride event. The skyline sparkled behind him, a far cry from Reading's stifling courtroom. Marcus stood by his side, their hands clasped, a rainbow flag draped over their shoulders. Lila was in the crowd, her blue hair now streaked with purple, cheering louder than anyone. Eli's voice carried over the microphone, steady and strong. "I was branded a criminal for loving who I love, for standing up for what's right," he said. "But you turned that label into a badge of honor." The crowd roared, and Eli's heart swelled. He spoke of the fight, of Marcus's unwavering love, of Lila's courage, of Danielle's salute. He spoke of a world where no one would face a courtroom for being themselves. The nonprofit Love Stands had grown with chapters in 5 states. They'd helped dozens of queer youth, from legal aid to safe housing. Sarah and Javier were board members, their expertise guiding the mission. Even Daniels had joined, volunteering to speak to law enforcement about inclusivity, inspired by his son's return to his life. Backstage, Eli and Marcus stole a quiet moment. "You ever think we'd be here?" Marcus asked, his green eyes bright. Eli laughed, kissing him softly. "I just wanted to keep you safe. Now look at us." The event ended with fireworks, bursts of color lighting up the night. Eli watched, his arm around Marcus, Lila dancing nearby with new friends. The handwritten note from his imagined courtroom scene, "Love is never a crime," felt like a prophecy fulfilled. They'd turned pain into purpose, hate into hope. As they drove home to Portland, Eli thought of the guard's salute, a moment of respect that had changed him. It wasn't just about freedom, it was about dignity, about proving that love could triumph over fear. He looked at Marcus, asleep in the passenger seat, and smiled. They'd faced the worst and come out stronger. and they'd keep fighting, for every heart still waiting to be seen.